Poor rancher married fat stranger for a cow. On wedding night, she locked the door. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's tale. Jack was a poor rancher, barely scraping by in the harsh, unforgiving land of the American West. His ranch was small, his cattle few, and his dreams of prosperity were fading fast. But in the frontier, life had a way of forcing men like Jack to make hard choices. One day, he found himself at the mercy of a wealthy landowner, desperate to keep his ranch from slipping through his fingers. The landowner had an offer for Jack, one that was far from what he'd ever imagined. In exchange for a prized cow, Jack was to marry a woman, a stranger, whom he had never met before. Bella, the woman he was to wed, was larger than most women Jack had encountered. She wasn't what anyone would call beautiful, but there was something about her that intrigued him. Jack didn't want to marry her, but the landowner's offer was too good to refuse. He needed that cow to survive the harsh winters ahead. Jack and Bella were wed in a small ceremony, surrounded by few people. It was an arrangement, a business deal more than a celebration. Bella didn't speak much, and Jack kept his distance, focused only on the future that lay ahead, the one with a cow that might help save his ranch. The night of their wedding, things took an unexpected turn. After the ceremony, as the evening's shadows grew long, Jack went to the room they would share. He expected a quiet night, perhaps a few awkward moments, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. When he reached the door, he was surprised to find it locked. Jack knocked softly, calling out to Bella, but there was no answer. He knocked again, a little harder this time, and yet there was still no reply. Confused, he tried the door handle. It wouldn't budge. Bella had locked the door from the inside. Jack stood there, his mind racing with questions. Why had she locked him out? Was she angry? Was this her way of punishing him for the situation they found themselves in? He stood there for a while, trying to make sense of it all. As the night grew colder, Jack realized that his new life, his new marriage, wasn't going to be as simple as he had hoped. Bella had shown him a side of herself that was both mysterious and challenging. The door remained locked, and Jack was left outside, wondering what lay ahead for them both. This was only the beginning of a story that would challenge both Jack and Bella in ways they never expected. What had started as a forced union in exchange for a cow was about to turn into something much more complicated. Jack had no idea that the events of this night would shape their lives forever. The night dragged on as Jack stood outside the locked door, his thoughts running wild. He had never imagined his life would take such a strange turn. Just hours ago, he had been a free man, making a deal for a cow to save his struggling ranch. Now, he was a husband, bound to a woman he barely knew, and the door between them was firmly shut. He stood there, in the cold, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But the silence was all he received. He finally decided to go to bed, but the weight of the day's events kept him tossing and turning. The wind howled outside, but it couldn't drown out the thoughts swirling in his mind. Why had Bella locked him out? Did she resent him for their forced marriage? Was this her way of taking control of a situation she had no say in? Jack had hoped that, over time, things would settle, that the awkwardness would fade, but now he wasn't so sure. Morning came, but Bella didn't speak of the night before. She had made breakfast as if nothing had happened, but Jack couldn't shake the tension in the air. The coldness between them was palpable, and neither one of them knew how to bridge the gap. Jack tried to make small talk, but Bella remained distant, her eyes focused on the tasks at hand. He couldn't help but notice the quiet strength she possessed. She wasn't the fragile, needy woman he had imagined. There was a firmness to her, a self-assurance that both intrigued and unsettled him. As the days passed, Jack learned more about Bella. She had lived a difficult life, much harder than his own, and it showed in the way she carried herself. She didn't complain or ask for help. She just got things done. She worked the land alongside him, showing a resilience that Jack admired, but it only made him feel more uncertain about their relationship. Was this the woman he was supposed to spend his life with? A woman he barely knew, who had locked him out on their wedding night and kept her distance ever since. As Jack wrestled with his feelings, he noticed that Bella had a secret, something she wasn't sharing. Late one evening, after a long day's work, Jack caught a glimpse of her standing near the barn, holding something in her hands. It was a small leather pouch, old and weathered, and it seemed to mean something to her. She didn't notice Jack watching from a distance as she carefully tucked it into her coat, hiding it from sight. Jack couldn't help but feel a surge of curiosity. What was in that pouch? Why did it seem so important to her? The more he thought about it, the more it bothered him. He needed to know. The next day, Jack confronted Bella about it. She didn't answer at first, her gaze turning cold, but eventually, she relented. "It's nothing," she said. "Just some old things." But Jack didn't believe her. He could sense there was more to the story. "You're hiding something," he said, his voice more insistent than he intended. Bella stared at him for a moment, and Jack could see the internal battle she was fighting. Finally, she sighed and opened the pouch. Inside, there were small, carefully wrapped items, pieces of jewelry, trinkets, and something that appeared to be a family heirloom. "These were my mother's," Bella explained softly. "She gave them to me before she passed. They're all I have left of her." Jack felt a rush of guilt. He had been so focused on his own feelings of confusion and frustration that he hadn't considered Bella's loss. She had a past, a history that she was reluctant to share, and Jack realized he had no right to push her for answers. They were both living with the weight of their own struggles, each trying to make sense of the new life they had been thrust into. Over time, Jack began to see Bella in a new light. She wasn't just the stranger he had married for a cow. She was a woman with her own story, her own pain, and her own strength. As the days turned into weeks, Jack started to feel a shift in their relationship. It wasn't the kind of love he had expected, but it was something else, something deeper, born out of mutual respect. But even as he began to understand her, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still so much more to learn about Bella, and about the strange, mysterious life they had started together. As weeks passed, Jack and Bella fell into a strange routine. The awkwardness that had initially defined their marriage began to soften, replaced by a quiet understanding. Bella worked beside Jack, her strong hands tending to the land, fixing fences, and caring for the animals. She was a hard worker, and Jack couldn't help but respect her for that. But there were still moments when Jack felt the distance between them, moments when he would catch her looking out over the horizon, as if lost in thought, her mind far away. One evening, as they sat together at the small table in their cabin, Jack couldn't help but ask, "Bella, why did you agree to this marriage?" He didn't know why he had asked it now, but the question had been nagging at him for some time. Bella didn't immediately respond, and Jack could see her considering whether or not to share. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "I didn't have much choice. My family was in debt, and this marriage was the only way to save them. I thought maybe it wouldn't be so bad." Jack nodded slowly. He understood the desperation that could drive a person to make such decisions. He had felt that same kind of desperation when he agreed to the deal with the landowner. "I didn't ask for this either," he admitted. "But I'm here now and I'm trying." Bella looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time, Jack saw something in her eyes, a flicker of warmth, perhaps even an understanding of his own struggles. She nodded. "We're both stuck in this, Jack. But we can make it work. We have to." They both knew there were no easy answers, no simple ways out of the situation they had found themselves in. But over time, the coldness that had once defined their marriage began to thaw. They shared quiet moments, working together in the fields, sitting by the fire at night. Jack even found himself looking forward to their evenings together, not because of any romantic feelings, but because of the companionship Bella had become. One afternoon, as Jack was mending a fence, Bella came to him with a small bundle in her hands. It was wrapped in cloth, and Jack's curiosity got the better of him. "What's that?" he asked. Bella hesitated before unwrapping it. Inside, there was a small wooden carving, a figure of a man and a woman standing together, carved in intricate detail. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he realized what it was. Is this your family?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Bella nodded, her eyes distant. "It's a reminder of where I came from. My parents carved it before." She trailed off, not finishing the sentence. Jack felt a pang of guilt. He had assumed that Bella's past was nothing more than a burden, something she was trying to escape. But now, he saw that it was a part of her, something she carried with her even in this new life they were trying to build together. "It's beautiful," Jack said softly. Bella smiled faintly. "It's all I have left of them." That moment marked a turning point for Jack. He realized that Bella wasn't just the woman he had been forced to marry. She was a person with a past, with dreams and regrets, just like him. And for the first time, he felt a connection to her that went beyond the forced nature of their marriage. As the days went by, Jack's feelings toward Bella continued to shift. It wasn't love, at least not in the way he had imagined, but it was something deeper, something more real. They were two people trying to make the best of a difficult situation, and in that shared struggle, they began to form a bond that neither of them had expected. Jack had never believed in fate, but he couldn't help but wonder if this strange union had brought them together for a reason. As he sat next to Bella that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was something more waiting for them in the future, something beyond the struggles of today. As the months went by, Jack and Bella found themselves settling into a rhythm on the ranch. The days were long, filled with hard work under the unforgiving sun, but slowly, they were making progress. The fence was fixed, the animals were healthy, and the small crops Jack had planted were beginning to grow. Yet despite their efforts, there was always an underlying tension between them. It wasn't the kind of tension that came from anger or dislike, but rather the weight of unspoken words and untold stories. Jack had come to respect Bella for her strength, but there was still so much about her past that she kept hidden. He had learned bits and pieces over time, her family's debts, the mysterious circumstances that had led her to the landowner's offer, but she never seemed ready to share the full truth. Bella, on the other hand, had grown to rely on Jack in ways she hadn't anticipated. The farm was not an easy place to be, and she had found comfort in knowing that she wasn't alone. But she still felt the heavy burden of her past pressing on her, and she wasn't sure how much of it she was ready to reveal to Jack. One evening, after a particularly long day of work, they sat by the fire, the crackling flames the only sound in the stillness of the night. Bella was quiet, her thoughts drifting far away, and Jack couldn't help but feel the distance between them once again. He had never been good with emotions, never knew how to ask the right questions, but tonight, something pushed him to try again. "Bella," Jack began, his voice softer than usual. "You never told me why you were willing to marry me. I know it wasn't for love, but what was it for, really? You said your family was in trouble, but is that all?" Bella's eyes flickered toward him, but she didn't respond right away. Jack could see the hesitation in her expression, the battle within her to decide whether or not to open up. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "It wasn't just about saving my family. It was about survival. My father had made some bad decisions, and my family was left with nothing. I was the youngest of 5 children, and when everything fell apart, I had to make a choice. I could stay and watch my family starve, or I could take this chance. It wasn't much, but it was the only way out." Jack's heart tightened as he listened. He had known there was more to her story, but hearing it from her lips made it feel real. She had made a sacrifice, a hard, desperate choice to survive, to give her family a fighting chance. "I don't know if I can ever make up for what happened," Bella continued, her gaze distant. "But I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to be like the others, asking for help, begging for charity. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet, even if it meant marrying a stranger." Jack took a deep breath, the weight of her words sinking in. He had thought of their marriage as something forced, something neither of them had chosen willingly. But now, he saw it in a different light. Bella wasn't just a woman he had been tied to by circumstance. She was someone who had fought for her life, someone who had done what was necessary to protect her family. He reached out, placing a hand on hers, the touch quiet, but full of meaning. "I understand now," he said, his voice low. "I never knew what it was like to have to make those kinds of choices. But I see you, Bella. I see what you've done, what you've been through. And I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Bella's eyes softened, a hint of vulnerability breaking through the walls she had built around herself. "Thank you, Jack," she whispered. The next few weeks brought more challenges. Winter was coming, and with it came the heavy task of preparing for the cold months ahead. The animals needed extra care, the barn needed repairs, and the crops had to be harvested before the frost set in. It was a race against time, and both Jack and Bella worked tirelessly, side by side. As the days grew colder, the bond between them strengthened. They were no longer just two people stuck in a marriage of convenience. They were partners, sharing the burdens of the ranch and the responsibilities of each other's lives. The winter winds howled outside, but inside the cabin, there was warmth, both from the fire and from the quiet understanding that had begun to grow between them. Bella still didn't talk much about her past, but Jack no longer pushed. He understood that healing was a slow process, and he was content to wait, to be patient. They had both come a long way from that first night, locked behind the door. There was still much to learn, but for the first time, Jack felt hopeful. They had made it through the hardest part, the part where two strangers, bound by necessity, had begun to understand each other as real people, not just as an arrangement. And in that quiet understanding, Jack realized something that surprised him. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something more than either of them had expected. Winter settled in, bringing with it the harsh winds and deep cold that defined life on the frontier. The ranch, though modest, had become a place of quiet perseverance for Jack and Bella. The work had been hard, but they had learned to rely on each other, the rhythm of their daily lives becoming more familiar. Jack had never expected to find such comfort in the company of a woman he had married out of necessity, yet here he was, looking forward to their quiet evenings by the fire. As the days grew shorter and the cold crept deeper into the bones of the earth, Bella began to open up in small ways. It wasn't much, but it was progress. One evening, after a long day of tending to the animals, Bella came into the cabin with a small bundle of dried herbs. Jack noticed she was quieter than usual, her expression thoughtful. "What's wrong?" he asked, not sure what had triggered her sudden silence. Bella hesitated, her fingers brushing over the herbs in her hand, as if they could offer her some sort of comfort. "I'm just thinking," she said slowly. "I haven't been back home in a long time. I wonder how they're doing." Jack's heart tightened. He had known that Bella's family had been in debt, and that she had made sacrifices to protect them, but he hadn't realized how deeply the separation from them still affected her. "Do you want to go back?" Jack asked, his voice soft. Bella shook her head. "I can't. They wouldn't want to see me like this." She turned toward the fire, her eyes reflecting the flames. "Sometimes I feel like I've lost everything, even my family." Jack stood up and walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You haven't lost me, Bella," he said gently. "You're not alone anymore." Bella looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of insincerity. But all she saw was truth. For the first time since their marriage, Bella felt a warmth she hadn't known she needed. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something real. The next morning, as the sun rose over the frost-covered fields, Jack made a decision. He had no idea how things would turn out with Bella, but he knew he had to try. They had both come a long way since that first night, locked behind the door. He wanted to give her something, a gesture of hope for the future they were building together. He spent the day working with a determination he hadn't felt in years. He repaired the barn roof, chopped firewood, and even set aside some money he had saved from selling a few cattle. By the time Bella returned from checking on the animals, Jack was waiting for her, a smile on his face. "I've got something for you," he said, his voice steady. Bella raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Jack held out the small bundle of savings he had set aside. "It's for you. To do whatever you want with. It's yours." Bella stared at him, her eyes widening in surprise. She had never expected such an offer. She had always been the one to sacrifice, to put others first. But here was Jack, offering her a piece of his hard-earned work, a gesture of trust. She took the money, her fingers brushing over his as she did. "Thank you," she whispered, not knowing what else to say. Jack smiled softly. "It's just a start," he said, his voice quiet but filled with meaning. "I want to help you, Bella. I want to make this work." Bella felt a lump form in her throat. She had never known kindness like this. She had never known a man who cared so much, even after everything she had put him through. It was a turning point for her, a moment of realization that, despite the struggles, there was a chance for something more between them. Over the following weeks, their relationship continued to evolve. They shared their hopes and fears, their pasts and dreams, as they worked together to build a life on the ranch. Bella didn't talk about her family much, but she began to trust Jack with the pieces of herself she had kept hidden for so long. Jack, in turn, became more open with her, sharing his own doubts and desires for the future. They began to build something real together, something that wasn't based on a contract or a deal, but on the quiet, steady bond that had grown between them. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, of unspoken words, but there was also something else, a shared understanding that they were no longer strangers. They were partners. And that, Jack realized, was worth more than any cow or piece of land. As winter gave way to spring, the ranch began to feel like home, not just for Jack, but for Bella as well. She had found a place where she was no longer defined by her past, but by the choices she made every day. And for the first time, she didn't feel so alone. Spring arrived slowly, melting the snow that had blanketed the land for months. The ranch seemed to come alive with new energy as the days grew warmer. The animals were grazing once more, and the earth began to show signs of life, pushing up green shoots from the soil that had been frozen just weeks before. For Jack and Bella, the change in seasons mirrored the changes in their own lives. The tension between them, their relationship. "I thought these might brighten up the cabin," she said softly, handing the flowers to Jack. He smiled back, accepting them. "You always know how to make things better," he said, his voice sincere. Bella shrugged, her usual guarded expression softening. "It's just flowers," she replied, but Jack could see the warmth in her eyes. "No, it's not just flowers," he said, placing the bundle on the porch table. "It's you. You've been making things better for both of us." Bella felt her heart soften at his words. She had never been one to accept compliments easily, especially not from someone like Jack, a man she had once seen as nothing more than a business deal. But now, she was beginning to see him in a different light. He wasn't just the man she had married out of necessity. He was her partner, someone who had stood by her side and helped her build something from nothing. Their relationship was still far from perfect, but it had become something real, something worth fighting for. That evening, as the sun began to set, Jack and Bella sat on the porch together, watching the orange and pink hues of the sky stretch across the horizon. The wind was gentle, carrying with it the scent of fresh grass and earth. They were quiet for a while, content in the stillness, but Jack finally broke the silence. "Bella, I've been thinking," he said, his tone serious. "I want to make sure this place stays ours. I want to work with you to make it better, to make it grow." Bella turned to him, a curious look on her face. "What do you mean?" she asked. Jack took a deep breath before continuing. "I mean that I want to build something here that we can both be proud of. I want to take this ranch to the next level, and I need your help. We've already come so far, and I think we can do even more." Bella was silent for a moment, considering his words. She had never imagined she would be working side by side with Jack, building something together. But as she looked at him, she realized he was serious. He wasn't just asking her to help him with the ranch. He was asking her to join him in creating a future that was theirs, not just his. "I'm with you," Bella said finally, her voice steady. "I'll help you. Whatever we need to do, we'll do it together." Jack smiled, relief and gratitude flooding through him. "Thank you," he said softly. "I don't think I could do this without you." The days that followed were filled with hard work and planning. Jack and Bella worked together, making improvements to the ranch, fixing the barn, and adding new fences to keep the cattle safe. They worked late into the evenings, often finding themselves talking more than they ever had before. They shared stories of their past, their hopes for the future, and the things that had shaped them into who they were. Jack learned more about Bella's family, the sacrifices they had made, and the pain she had carried with her for so long. Bella, in turn, learned about Jack's own past, his struggles, his regrets, and his desire to make something of himself, something that would outlast him. As the months passed, their bond grew stronger. It wasn't just a partnership based on necessity anymore. It was a partnership based on trust, respect, and shared dreams. Bella had never thought much about the future before, but now, as she looked at the ranch, she saw it differently. It was more than just land and cattle. It was a place where they could both find peace, where they could build a life together. And for the first time, she realized she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. By the time summer arrived, the ranch had transformed. The crops were flourishing, the barn had been repaired, and the cattle were thriving. Jack and Bella had done it. They had built something from nothing, and it was theirs. They stood together on the porch one evening, looking out over the land they had worked so hard to make their own. For Bella, it was a moment of quiet pride. She had come a long way from the woman who had locked herself behind a door on their wedding night. She had learned to trust, to open up, and to share her life with someone else. And now, standing beside Jack, she knew they had a future. Together. As the summer months passed, Jack and Bella found themselves growing even closer. Their lives, once full of uncertainty and tension, had transformed into a rhythm of shared responsibility and mutual respect. The ranch, which had once been a place of struggle and hardship, now felt like home. They worked together seamlessly, making improvements where they could and building their future from the ground up. But as the days stretched on, Bella could sense a shift in Jack. He had always been a man of few words, but recently he had become even more distant, as if something was weighing heavily on his mind. Bella noticed the small changes, his quiet moments, the way his gaze would wander off into the distance, as if lost in thought. It was unlike him, and it troubled her. One evening, after a long day of work, Bella decided to confront him. They sat together on the porch, the golden light of the setting sun casting a warm glow over the land. The air was still, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Bella broke the silence. "Jack, what's been going on with you lately? You've been distant, like there's something you're not telling me." Jack looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of frustration and uncertainty. He had been keeping something from her, something that had been gnawing at him for weeks. He had been thinking about it nonstop, and now, he couldn't keep it inside any longer. "It's nothing," he said at first, but Bella could see through his words. She had come to know him better than that. "Jack, you don't have to carry this alone," she said gently. "Whatever it is, we can figure it out together." Jack hesitated, then sighed. He took a deep breath and looked her in the eye. "Bella, I've been thinking about the future. About this place, about us. We've worked hard to make something of the ranch, but I can't shake the feeling that there's more I should be doing. I've been thinking about leaving, maybe heading out to work with other ranchers, finding a better opportunity." Bella felt a sharp pang in her chest at his words. She had never imagined that Jack, the man who had fought so hard to build this life with her, would even consider leaving. It felt like a blow to everything they had worked for. "You want to leave?" she asked, her voice a mix of hurt and confusion. Jack nodded, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know," he admitted. I feel like I'm not doing enough. Like I'm not enough. You've put so much into this, Bella, and I don't want to hold you back. Maybe there's something more out there for both of us." Bella took a moment to process his words. She had seen Jack struggle before, but this felt different. It wasn't just the daily hardships they had faced together. It was a deeper fear, one that threatened to undo everything they had built. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to do more, to be more. But in that moment, Bella realized something important. Jack wasn't just running from the ranch. He was running from his own fear of failure, and perhaps from the fear of not being good enough for her. She reached out, gently placing her hand over his. "Jack, listen to me," she said softly. "We've come this far together. This ranch, this life, we built it together. You're not holding me back. You're everything I need. You don't have to prove anything to me. You don't have to go anywhere." Jack looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. "But what if I'm not enough?" he asked quietly. "What if this is all just a dream, and it doesn't work out?" Bella squeezed his hand, her voice steady and unwavering. "We've already made it work, Jack. Together. And if things get tough again, we'll face it together. That's what this is about. It's not about being perfect. It's about being here for each other, no matter what." There was a long silence as Jack took in her words. Slowly, the tension in his body began to ease. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. Bella was right. They didn't have to be perfect. They didn't have to have all the answers. What mattered was that they were in this together. As the evening wore on, Jack made a decision. He wasn't going to leave. He wasn't going to run from his fears or his doubts. He was going to stay and build this life with Bella, not because it was easy, but because it was worth fighting for. He turned to her, his eyes softening. "I'm sorry I even thought about leaving," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "I won't go. Not if it means losing what we have." Bella smiled, her heart lifting. "Good," she said, squeezing his hand. "Because I wouldn't want to go through this with anyone else." From that moment on, Jack knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. They had already built something strong, something worth protecting. And with Bella by his side, he knew they could overcome anything. The future was uncertain, but as long as they had each other, it didn't matter. They were stronger than their fears, stronger than the doubts that had once threatened to tear them apart. Together, they had everything they needed. The months continued to roll by, each one bringing its own challenges and triumphs. The ranch had grown into a place of pride for Jack and Bella. They had made it their own, and with every passing season, it became more than just land or livestock. It became a home. But despite all their hard work, there were still moments of doubt that crept in, especially for Bella. She had spent so many years in survival mode, trying to protect her family, and now that she had finally begun to build something with Jack, she couldn't help but wonder if it would all come crashing down. It wasn't that she didn't trust Jack. She did, more than anyone. It was the lingering fear from her past, the fear that she might lose everything again. One evening, as the sun began to dip behind the mountains, Bella sat on the porch, staring out at the fields they had worked so hard to cultivate. Jack had gone to tend to the cattle, and for the first time in a long while, Bella found herself alone with her thoughts. The silence seemed louder than usual, and it weighed on her chest. She had told Jack that she was ready for whatever came next, but the truth was, she wasn't sure. She wasn't sure if she was ready to let herself truly hope for the future, to believe that they could have a life without the shadow of her past looming over them. Bella stood up and walked toward the barn, the cool evening air brushing against her skin. She needed something to do, something to focus on. The barn was quiet, and as she walked in, she could hear the soft sounds of the animals settling in for the night. Bella's fingers brushed along the wooden beams as she walked past, the familiarity of the space grounding her. But as she reached the far corner, she stopped. There, hidden in the shadows, was a small chest. Bella had forgotten about it. It had been tucked away there when they first arrived, filled with her old belongings from a life she had tried to leave behind. She had never opened it, not wanting to confront the memories inside. But tonight, the urge to face them was stronger than ever. Slowly, she knelt down and opened the chest. Inside were photographs, letters, and trinkets from her past, things that had meant something to her at one point, but now seemed like relics of a different life. Her fingers trembled as she picked up one of the photographs. It was of her family, taken before everything fell apart. Her parents, her siblings, standing together, smiling, unaware of the hardship that was about to come. Bella's throat tightened as she stared at the picture. She had been so young then, so full of hope. But now, as she looked at it, all she could feel was loss. She placed the photo back in the chest and closed it, her mind swirling with thoughts of what had been, what could have been. Just as she stood up, she heard footsteps behind her. Jack. He had finished with the cattle and had come looking for her. Bella, he asked, his voice gentle. Are you all right? Bella wiped her eyes quickly, not wanting him to see the vulnerability she was feeling. I'm fine, she said, though her voice betrayed her. Jack stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. I know you're still carrying a lot, Bella, but you don't have to do it alone anymore. Bella took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I know. It's just, sometimes, it feels like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, like everything will fall apart again. Jack took her hand in his grip firm and reassuring. It won't, he said quietly. We've come so far together, Bella. We've built this life, this home, and I'm not going anywhere. We're in this for the long haul. Bella looked into his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, she believed him. The fear, the uncertainty, began to fade, replaced by a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. Maybe it wasn't about having everything figured out, about knowing exactly what the future held. Maybe it was enough to know that, no matter what came their way, they would face it together. As they stood there, hand in hand, the last light of day slipped away, leaving only the quiet of the night. Bella felt a sense of calm wash over her, a realization that, no matter how uncertain the world might seem, they had each other. And that was enough. As the years passed, Jack and Bella's life on the ranch only grew stronger. They had built something together that neither had expected when they first met. It wasn't just the land or the cattle that made the ranch their home. It was the quiet, steadfast connection they had formed. They had faced hardships, doubts, and fears, but together, they had overcome them all. Bella had finally begun to put her past behind her, learning to trust not just Jack, but herself as well. And Jack, who had once felt unsure of his place in the world, had found peace in the life they had created. It wasn't perfect. There were still difficult days, moments when the weight of responsibility threatened to pull them under. But those moments were fewer, and each time, they grew stronger. One warm evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains, Bella leaned her head on Jack's shoulder. It was a simple moment, one they had shared countless times, but it felt like a culmination of everything they had been through. Bella smiled softly. The lines of worry that had once creased her face now softened with contentment. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" she said, her voice low and full of quiet pride. Jack nodded, his arm resting comfortably around her. "I never imagined it would turn out like this. I didn't think I was capable of all of this," he said, his voice filled with awe at the life they had built. Bella chuckled softly. "I think you've always been capable. You just needed the right reason to fight for it." Jack turned to her, his eyes searching hers for a moment, and then he smiled. "And what about you?" he asked. "What do you think you've become?" Bella thought for a moment, her gaze turning inward. "I've become someone who believes in second chances," she said softly. "Someone who knows that no matter how far we've fallen, we can always rise again." Jack squeezed her hand, a deep sense of gratitude flooding his chest. He realized how much he had learned from Bella, how much she had taught him about resilience, about hope, and about love. Their relationship was no longer about survival. It was about thriving, about building something that would last far beyond them. In the distance, they could hear the soft sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the occasional moo of the cattle in the fields. The world around them was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos that had once defined their lives. Bella closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the calm. For the first time in years, she felt at ease. There was no more fear of losing everything, no more running from the past. She had found a place in the world, not just in the ranch, but in Jack's heart. And Jack had found the same in her. They had built a future filled with love, respect, and partnership. It was a future that neither had imagined when they had first met, but it was one they had created together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack turned to Bella, his voice filled with quiet confidence. "We've done it," he said simply. Bella smiled and nodded. "We have," she agreed. Together, they had overcome the odds, built a life worth living, and learned to trust in each other. They didn't need anything else. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. In that moment, as the last light of day faded and the stars began to appear in the sky above them, Jack and Bella knew that their story was just beginning. They had found their home, their purpose, and most importantly, each other. And with that, they were ready for whatever the future had in store. Immerse yourself in the world of Western stories where two unlikely individuals come together to build a life amidst the rugged and unforgiving landscape. This gripping tale follows a poor rancher and a woman forced into a marriage for survival, as they overcome their pasts and build a future full of hope and resilience. As they work together on the ranch, their journey unfolds with moments of struggle, personal growth, and the discovery of trust in each other. The power of partnership is tested through hardships, but in the end, they realize they have built something stronger than they ever imagined. These Western stories captivate audiences with their authentic portrayal of love, sacrifice, and overcoming adversity. In a world where survival often comes at a high cost, the characters in these Western stories forge a future that proves even the toughest obstacles can be conquered with patience and dedication. Each twist and turn in the plot adds layers to the narrative, demonstrating the deep connection that can grow between two people when they truly learn to trust one another. For fans of Western stories that explore the resilience of the human spirit and the power of relationships, this journey is one to experience. Discover how these Western stories come to life with themes of redemption, hope, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow, even in the harshest conditions.